And start off today with the South Korea versus Singapore match with Matthias Loong versus Sangyoon Jeong. And you can see here that Singapore currently do have 4 wins, so they are on the verge of a victory here. They can no longer lose to South Korea, so South Korea do need to get at least 2 more wins to try and clinch that draw. And so we can see some of the teams that have been used there. And now that we've had quite a few of the matches, we've got a lot more teams to be able to show, and some quite interesting picks coming out from these players.
Oh, I'm delighted to see the amount of Reggie Alecki that is appearing on my screen at the moment. I can see it dotted around a few of the teams. And I think, as well, it's interesting kind of to take a look at some of the restricteds that we've seen lying around there as well. Already just kind of looking at the different teams that have been presented by these 2 countries. I can see a lot of Zacian there. I can also see a lot of Yveltal, Pokemon that I wasn't too sure was going to be one of the 4 runners when this format was announced, but it's great to see it kind of coming to the fray. Then you've got your classic combinations of kind of Groudon and Kyogre if you want to have that kind of weather dominance in a battle, and also that Shadow Rider Calyrex. I think that was certainly the Pokemon that's going to be the hot favorite coming out into this particular format at the moment. And I think it's certainly been able to kind of prove itself, but I want to see a little bit more on how the sort of teams are composed together. So what are those other 5 Pokemon going to be that are going to be able to support that Pokemon in the form of the Calyrex? But as you mentioned there, Jamie, there really is all to play for here with South Korea. They need to make sure that they win today to be able to at least level out a draw, because 1 losses mean that they will lose to Singapore.
Indeed, and I just want to give a quick shout out to Brian Sob, bringing that Torracat over Incineroar. Very, very nice pick, getting rid of your Dark typing so you can take on those Zacians a little bit better. So you get to see some very, very nice picks coming out for these restrictive formats. So now we can have a look at what these players are going to be bringing to the match. We can start with Matthias Loong here, going to be rocking that Zacian, as well as the Weezing that's going to be coming out. So usually a Pokemon that's paired with Regigigas, but they compare very well with the Zacian as well, because you can switch in the Weezing, turn off the Intrepid Sword, and as soon as you switch back out, Intrepid Sword activates and gives you another attack boost.
Yeah, it certainly does. And it's nice as well to kind of have that Weezing in play, because one of the biggest counters towards Zacian is other Pokemon bringing in their Intimidate ability users. So possibly if you've got your Intrepid Sword boost up and then you can get Weezing in on the field, then you can stop that ability from coming into play. It can also help out with a few, terrains that maybe you don't want in action. But Weezing, like you mentioned, is normally paired up with that Regigigas, so it's going to be interesting to see how it works on your team. I think it's always one of those Pokemon that can sometimes go backwards for you, in the sense you don't want to suppress any of your abilities that you want to utilize on the field.
Yeah, so some quite interesting picks coming out there. The Zapdos as well, very key to countering other Zacians, usually paired up with that Rocky Helmet and Static, so you can beat the Zacians as well as the Rapid Strike Urshifus. And you can see the tried and true combination of Rillaboom, Incineroar, and Urshifu there for Matthias as well. So now we can move on and look at what Sangyoon is going to be bringing to this match. And it is going to be a Groudon team as well. So going to be rocking some interesting picks here. That Cherrim going to be able to make use of the sun to get that Flower Gift going, and a Dragapult coming out as well.
Yeah, love seeing this combination here of the Groudon and the Cherrim, being able to get those sort of boosts up. And Cherrim always looks so happy to be on the battlefield. I know I go on about Reggie Alecki a lot and how bouncy and joyful he is to be in a Pokemon match, but Cherrim definitely is up there as well. The thing I love about this team is a lot of kind of the synergy that's going on. We mentioned the Groudon and Cherrim, but as well, Entei can come in and apply a lot of pressure. Having inner focus as well means you can't obviously flinch it. It's not going to be deterred from that. And you can go for some sort of snarls, go for some nice fire type moves in the sun as well that can obviously boost up that firepower. It could be quite a formidable threat, but the Pokemon that really stands out for me is that Stakataka, because not only does Stakataka give me nightmares, but it also can potentially be a really good Trick Room answer. It can set up Trick Room if needs be, and sometimes we have seen Pokemon like the Groudon maybe opting to be a Trick Room variant of that particular Pokemon and kind of going slow, and you can boost up and train the defenses a little bit more.
Yeah, so some very nice picks coming out from both players here. You can see some of the niche picks like that Weezing coming out from Matthias, the Cherrim coming out for Sangyoon as well. So now we can move on into this match here.
Yep, so you can see both the teams here up in team preview. Going to be really interesting to see how the combinations are going to go. You can see obviously on the one side we've got kind of that classic fire, water, grass combination, but I want to see what's going to come of that Weezing. I see it's locked in there as a lead, Jamie.
Yeah, so going to be wanting to turn off any of the potential droughts maybe of the Groudon, so you can reduce the fire damage that can come out from the Entei, or the Heat Crash that is definitely picking up on Groudon at this point as well. You can also turn off the Flower Gift if the Cherrim is in on the field, so definitely going to be a disruptive Pokemon for the Weezing here, but Groudon is usually paired up quite nicely against Zacian teams, because you can hit it super effectively with either your Precipice Blades or your choice of fire move as well, and you've got some Sky High defense, so you can take on the Zacian pretty well. So usually you would expect the Groudon Groudon to be in favor of that against that Zacian. But then you've got something like that Zapdos, going to be immune to the Precipice Blades. The Weezing's going to be able to reduce the damage of the fire moves as well. So yeah, going to be quite an interesting way of dealing with that Groudon. It doesn't look like Matthias is opting for the Rillaboom there. That's going to be the main way to break through that Groudon. So going to have to look for some other ways to defeat that Groudon. You do need to be concerned of something like the Dragapult as well. Zacian does naturally outspeed it, but people do tend to run it slightly bulkier and slower as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the speeds match up between the Zacian and the Dragapult. Because if that Dragapult does outspeed, then it won't be able to just be taken out immediately by a Behemoth Blade.
Yeah, of course, and that's where game one really is, very critical for that kind of information game, being able to work out how the opponent has trained their Pokemon, which kind of stats they've invested in more, and then obviously determining those vital speed tiers. But you can see, coming out into the fray, we have got the Groudon and the Rillaboom joining the field, and on the opposing side, the Urshifu and Weezing combinations. So, lovely to see the shiny form coming out into action as well, and the neutralizing gas will now be suppressing these abilities. So we're not going to see any terrain come out from Rillaboom or no sun from the Groudon.
So that's a really nice use of neutralizing gas there, really freeing up this Urshifu. So it can't be hit by the priority Grassy Glide anymore from the Rillaboom, or the Drought being activated as well means that its water type moves are still going to be at full strength as well. Definitely still open to a fake out from the Rillaboom as well, and nothing really can stop that. So the Weezing doesn't really want to be taking on the Groudon itself. It can take on the Rillaboom reasonably well, but if the fake out just hits into the Urshifu, the Weezing's not going to be able to do too much. It could potentially get a burn into the Groudon or the Rillaboom, but maybe you just want to be protecting it so you can keep the Grassy Surge and the Drought off the field so that your Urshifu can do the most amount of damage it can without the Drought being able to reduce the damage of those water moves.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Weezing doesn't want to leave itself vulnerable from a potential Precipice Blade coming out from that Groudon. So just wisely protecting his Urshifu, uses the opportunity to pivot out with the U-turn. Not one of the most common moves that we've ever seen on an Urshifu. A little bit of a unique choice there, but certainly is going to help out Matthias being able to bring in a Pokemon from the back and apply a little bit more offensive pressure. And it also allows your Urshifu to come in a little bit later on, protect it, and just make sure that it's preserved to be able to deal out that big damage that we know Urshifu was capable of a little bit later on in the match.
Yeah, U-turn not a move you usually see on Urshifu. It usually does indicate some kind of choice item, whether that is going to be the choice scarf or the choice band here. But Zapdos is going to be a very good switch in if that Groudon went for a Precipice Blades.
Yeah, going to be the knockoff coming out though from the Rillaboom, falling into the Protect there, as Precipice Blades is indeed the move of choice for the opposing Groudon, but to no avail. Zapdos up in the air, and the Protect from the Weezing.
So a very nice play from Matthias here, getting some nice damage onto the Rillaboom. Probably going to put it in range of something like a Sludge Bomb for the Weezing, or maybe a Hurricane or a Heat Wave coming out from the Zapdos. And the Zapdos itself is in a very strong position now. Can't be hit by that Precipice Blades. If the Groudon is carrying Heat Crash, it's going to be not doing as much damage as it would have done with that Drought ability activated thanks to that Weezing. And you can threaten down that Rillaboom pretty well. Rillaboom can't really do too much damage to the Zapdos as well. So Zapdos pivoting in on that from that U-turn from the Urshifu, going to put itself in a really nice position here. Can get some good damage down onto the Groudon if it wanted. If it is carrying that Hurricane, it is going to be slightly more accurate than if the sun was up as well, so slightly less risk there. And if it's got Heat Wave as well, you can just launch that, get some good damage into the Rillaboom as well. But it is going to be Hurricane, and it is going to be connecting here.
Yeah, I like this play, targeting down that Rillaboom that, you don't want to have on the opposing side if it wants to go for any of those grass-type moves into your Urshifu later on, and obviously that fake-out pressure coming in again, it's nice to have that removed. Precipice Blade's going to come in, though, it's going to find its mark on the Weezing, but thanks to its Focus Sash, is going to be able to hang on and survive. Possibly going for something like that Will-O-Wisp here to just negate the offensive pressure of that Groudon, does indeed find its mark, and is able to inflict the burn upon its opponent here. So really good plays here from Matthias here, just being able to kind of negate the offensive pressure of that Groudon and pick up a solid KO in the process.
Yeah, really strong start from Matthias here. Getting rid of that Rillaboom straight away. Going to be freeing up that Urshifu quite a lot now, as priority Grassy Glide is no longer an option if Sangyoon was able to take care of that Weezing. And getting the burn onto the Groudon means that all of Matthias' Pokemon will be able to take it on a lot better. The Zacian will feel a lot more safe now going into that Groudon, as the Precipice Blades won't be doing as much damage here. So the Groudon really not going to be threatening too much damage onto this Zapdos. It will be able to take the knockout on the Weezing at least, because it is down to 1 HP thanks to that Focus Sash. But still going to be turning off that ability. The Drought is still not activated, so with this Entei coming in, even its Sacred Fires won't be boosted either, so still going to be doing some reduced damage here. And is still going to be threatening some good damage onto the Zapdos at least. If it does carry Stone Edge, it'll be able to hit it super effectively. That is quite a common move that is run on the Enteis these days, and Sacred Fire would be another option if it doesn't carry that Stone Edge. And the nice thing about the Sacred Fire is it doesn't make any contact, so it doesn't have to worry about that static or that very common item, the Rocky Helmet, that could potentially be on on that Zapdos as well. So Zapdos is still in a very strong position here. Doesn't really care about the Groudon now that it has been burned as well. Can just launch some attacks into that Entei, whether it wants to just go for an accurate Thunderbolt or go for that slightly stronger but slightly more risky Hurricane into the Entei as well, just to get some good damage here.
Well, Matthias really running down the clock in this particular turn, making sure every second counts in his decision-making going forward. Weezing, though, I think quite wisely protecting here, you know, very vulnerable, and you don't want to be KO that would bring the Sun onto the field and boost up the Fire-type moves potentially from that Entei. Going to be able to protect herself from the extreme speed, and Zapdos finding its mark again with the Hurricane. Tarkney down does actually a huge chunk of damage, over 50% to that Entei. That is very significant, and gets the confusion as well. Precipice Blades once again not going to be able to find its mark at all due to flying typing and protect. So once again, Matthias really kind of being in the driving seat in this particular turn.
Yeah, it looks like the Sangyoon was trying to cover a switch in case Matthias did want to preserve that Weezing, because the Extreme Speed would have taken out that Weezing, and then Precipice Blades just whiffs into the Zapdos regardless there. So trying to cover for a switch that didn't happen, and that just allows Matthias to get some really nice damage onto that Entei. Also picking up that confusion as well makes it too risky for Sangyoon to continue here.
Yeah, and you can just see the forfeit being locked in here. Probably wanting to advance as quickly as possible into that game 2 and start thinking about a strategy and adaptation. I mean, again, I think the Weezing really did play its part. We kind of talked about that a little bit in pre-game, but actually being able to shut down his abilities meant that the offensive pressure coming out from any Fire-type moves was obviously negated, and Rillaboom not being able to access that grassy terrain, being able to then have the priority kind of grassy glide, and obviously boosting up those Grass-type moves anyway from the terrain, just kind of put the offensive pressure down on the opposing side of the field.
It didn't really seem like there was too many ways for Sangyoon to break through that Zapdos. As soon as the Groudon got burned, that's definitely not going to be an option to be able to defeat that Zapdos. I was quite surprised to see the Entei not going for the target into the Zapdos when the Precipice Blades would have easily picked up the knockout on the Weezing at that point, so definitely needs to find a way to break through. The Stack Attacker, if it is carrying a Rock-type move, will be able to do some good damage to the Zapdos and get itself into Trick Room as well, so that it can get itself faster than the Zapdos and start launching off those Rock Slides. But still would have to be careful of the Will-O-Wisp that can still come out from the Weezing. Dragapult would be another option, but it's got options like Dragon Darts that will be able to avoid the Rocky Helmets. But if you want to go for the Phantom Force, that will still be risking the Static and the Rocky Helmet as well. So definitely needs to find a way through that Zapdos. It may be that the Groudon and the Entei are the best options, but they would be if the sun was up. So it seems like the Weezing is still a very strong pick here to stop any of the abilities, mainly the Drought to reduce the Fire-type damage that's going to be coming out from both those Pokemon. You probably do want to be bringing Groudon and Entei in the face of a Zacian, because they are the best Pokemon to break through the Zacian, which we didn't even see hit the field at all for Matthias. So able to win the first game without even using his restricted Pokemon. So putting himself in a really nice position, still being able to make use of that Zapdos as well. It's Sangyu's decision to be able to needs to find a way to break through that Zapdos.
Yeah, Zapdos certainly was a bit of a troublemaker in that particular match, and I'm going to be interested to see how Sangyoon's able to adapt going into this. Possibly, I'd love to see that Dragapult come out into the fray. We know what an offensive pressure it can be, but it depends whether it has that supportive role build instead. You can see the leads jumping out, those two troublesome Pokemon on Matthias' side, the Weezing and the Zapdos. On the opposing side, there is the Rillaboom and the Groudon once again having their abilities suppressed by the Weezing.
Yeah, so still not going to get that grassy terrain. Doesn't really matter too much. You would expect the Rillaboom would want to go for a fake out into this position, whether that is to break the Focus Sash or the Weezing, or to just put a stop to that Zapdos this turn.
Yeah, you can see the fake out coming out this time, targeting down into that Zapdos, just going to protect the Rillaboom from taking any potential Hurricane damage, but will not be able to avoid taking that little bit of Rocky Helmet. And I love this adjustment here from Sangyoon going for that Swords Dance, just being able to boost up the Groudon by 2 stages of attack, and that will certainly be able to apply a little bit more pressure onto that Zapdos, as long as it's not going for Precipice Blades.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot more damage coming out from Sangyu's side of the field. Now he's got a +2 Groudon instead of a Burns Groudon that's not going to be doing too much damage. And yeah, now it's going to be a massive threat on the field. The Rillaboom smartly putting a stop to that Zapdos so it can't get any damage with the Hurricanes here. Still can go for the Hurricane, and that would do some very good damage to the Rillaboom. Maybe with the Rocky Helmet chip it would put it in range, but it's ended up going to be avoiding that Hurricane.
Yeah, Zapdos not able to find its mark, I think, for the first time in this particular set. The U-turn coming out, though, going to break that Focus Sash on the Weezing, leaving it very vulnerable to a potential Precipice Blades follow-up from that Groudon. And Sangyoon using the opportunity to be able to kind of pivot in a Pokemon from the back, particularly if you're able to get rid of that Weezing and have the abilities kind of activate onto the field. It could be very helpful if something like the Entei's in force, because then it will be able to benefit from the stun that Groudon will be able to set.
Yeah, so Sangyoon taking the time to reposition themselves. The Rillaboom has broken the Focus Sash of the Weezing. We'll likely be seeing a Precipice Blade into that Weezing to try and pick up the knockout here. But really thinking hard of what he's going to be sending in here. It looks like it is going to be that Entei, so still going to be threatening down that Zapdos with the Sacred Fires as well. But Precipice Blade is launched and it does connect with that Weezing.
Yeah, able to find its mark, and we'll be able to remove that Weezing from play. And this is something that Sangyoon will be, I'm sure, very relieved to see that Weezing retreat back into its Pokeball, as well with the neutralizing gas wearing off. So the sun's going to be in the sky, and you have now got the Entei on the field as well. So something like a Sacred Fire is going to hit very hard into the opposing Pokemon on Matthias' side, and particularly if you know that Zacian, being the restricted, very likely in the back, we have kind of the advantage. We can spot it here. That's something that, you know, is obviously not going to be appreciating any of those Fire-type moves, particularly when they're boosted up, Jamie.
Yeah, so Urshifu's going to be the Pokemon of choice switching in here, going to be able to resist those Fire-type moves. But Sangyoon is in a much stronger position here. Manages now to get the sun up. Now that the Weezing has gone, the Drought has been activated. That's going to increase the damage of the Fire-type moves. It's also going to reduce the accuracy of the Hurricane as well, which is the only way that the Zapdos can hit this Groudon here, because Thunderbolt won't be doing any damage. You can go for a Thunderbolt, at least into the Entei, and still follow up with the Surging Strikes, but the Surging Strikes is effectively going to be at neutral now. Even though it's hitting super effective targets, the sun is going to be halving that back down to where it would normally be. So still going to be able to do some good damage, but not as good as you would hope with the Urshifu, the type matchups with the waters into the fire types, but still not too bad for Matthias. If he does manage to connect a Hurricane here, maybe a Surging Strikes and a Hurricane would be enough to pick up the knockout on the Groudon, but if it doesn't, or the Hurricane is not able to even connect with the Groudon is still sitting at +2 stages of attack and would still do some huge damage.
Again, you can see Matthias really running down the clock here. And we're going to see a switch from Sangyoon, retreating that Entei from these potential Surging Strikes and bringing in the Stack Attacker, a Pokemon known to have very good defensive capabilities indeed. Surging Strikes connecting. Of course, we're going to see the 3 critical hits as per what the move does. And even in the sunshine, you know, Entei wouldn't have appreciated being able to take these, but Stack Attacker able to join the field and take them easily. Zapdos in the sunshine, not going to be able to find its mark with that particular Hurricane. We know it gets reduced accuracy when the sun is in the sky. And Heat Crash is going to be able to retaliate. Static goes across, and not something we see every day, a ground type Pokemon getting paralyzed, and a little bit of Rocky Helmet chip as well. That could certainly come into effect a little bit later if those paralyses come through.
But it's also going to be halving the speed, and Stack Attacker has just switched on the field. So if Trick Room is set up, that paralysis will actually end up benefiting Sangyoon here. But Zacian is going to be the Pokemon switching in, would easily be able to knock out that Stack Attacker with any of its choice of fighting move here. Maybe even the Behemoth Blade at this point, so it'll be pretty close if it's able to. But the Urshifu is now still in the sun, and not going to be doing too much damage. Not able to knock out that Stack Attacker with just a Surging Strikes here. So still quite an awkward position for Matthias. Again, that paralysis definitely will help, since that Groudon really can just launch Precipice Blades at +2 and should pick up a double knockout if it manages to connect to both Precipice Blades here. So Matthias definitely does need to be concerned about that Groudon, and you need to make the choice now of whether you go for the double target into it, but then you give free reign to the Stack Attacker, because you wouldn't be able to knock out the Groudon without a double target. But if you don't go for the double target, maybe you're going to be risking the paralysis here.
Well, Surging Strikes coming out from the Urshifu, going to target down into the opposing Groudon. You can see the weak damage that it's dealing in the sunshine despite these critical hits. Groudon is going to be taking a significant chunk of damage, but if this is also followed up by the Zacian, then it could very well be picking up a KO here. Zacian goes to the close combat, but instead into that opposing Stack Attacker, picks up the solid KO against it, doesn't have to worry about a potential Trick Room being set up in this turn, but of course its defense is dropping as well. That said, in the face of a +2 Precipice Blade, I feel like the defense drops aren't necessarily the most beneficial, sort of concerning here. Heat Crash, however, is going to be the move choice, doesn't want to risk a potential miss, and picks up the solid KO against the Zacian, leaving, I believe, just that Urshifu for Matthias in this match.
Yeah, it's going to be facing down an Entei and a Groudon, which is not the worst Pokemon for it to be facing down, but still in the sun at least for the last couple of turns. So Entei probably should be able to survive a Surging Strikes coming out from the Urshifu, and most likely be able to deal with the Urshifu. You've still got the Rillaboom in the back waiting as well, so this definitely seals up this game. The Rillaboom can go for a Fake Out or a Grassy Glide here, whichever one it wants to go for, and the Urshifu is most likely going to be going down in that case. So definitely a very strong adjustment from Sangyoon here. I didn't really care about that Weezing. It didn't manage to get the Willows into the Groudon. You did manage to get a status condition. You got the paralysis at least, but at this point it's a little bit too late, because you weren't able to stop any of the damage output coming out from that Groudon. As you saw, after it got the Swords Dance, it was just picking up knockouts. It got the knockouts with the Heat Crash on the Zapdos and on the Zacian as well, and also the Precipice Blades on the Weezing. So Yeah, Matthias did a really good job of putting a stop to that Groudon last match, but allowed it to run rampant this one.
Yeah, I love the return of the Rillaboom here, just being able to go for that fake out. Groudon following up with the Precipice Blades, connecting down into that Urshifu, and will pick up an equalizing game here in this particular set. And, you know, it was just that little bit unfortunate for Matthias there. We were able to see kind of I believe it's the Choice Scarf on that Urshifu as well. So it was going to be locked into the Surging Strikes, no potential to be able to protect that. But just in case that was information Sangyoon hadn't been able to ascertain from the first two games, I think going for that fake out, guaranteeing a broken focus sash, if potentially the item hadn't been scouted out, then was just a really nice play to kind of wrap that up. But really nice to see a game 3 straight away here, Jamie. Always very exciting.
Yeah, so it's been adjustments from both players here. It was a really nice game from Matthias in that game 1. The Weezing was putting in a lot of work, but then Sangyoon made a really nice adjustment so that the Weezing was not as effective, managing to punish that Protect really heavily with that Sword Stance from the Groudon. So it's Matthias that needs to adjust here at this point. You definitely need to be putting a stop to that Groudon. You can't allow it to get another Sword Stance up and just keep attacking. It was able to get off at least 3 attacks, even through Paralysis as well, while it was at 2 stages of increased attack. Maybe you want to be bringing that Incineroar so that you can start intimidating that Groudon to reduce the damage output. And so he did miss a couple of Hurricanes here and there as well, but when you allow the Sun to get set up by losing the Weezing, then it is not the most accurate move either, so it's still a little bit awkward. The Rillaboom is still the best way of breaking through that Groudon on Matthias' side of the field, because it is the Pokemon that's going to hit it super effectively if you don't count the Urshifu in the Sun. But if you manage to keep the Sun off the field with the Weezing, if you manage to get the Weezing on the field with the Urshifu to still threaten down that Groudon, that might be a bit of a stronger position because you'll still be able to hit it super effectively with those Surging Strikes. So leading with Zapdos was a little bit too passive with the Weezing. The Urshifu was led in that game 1, managed to put on a lot of pressure and managed to get that important chip onto the Rillaboom with the U-turn as well. And then the Zapdos was able to come in and do some good work. But leading with the Zapdos didn't provide as much pressure onto Sangyoon's side of the field and was allowed to get that Sword Stance up. Matthias can't allow Sangyoon to do that again.
No, you're right. The really pivotal Pokemon for me was the Weezing. In game 1, we saw when it was able to be preserved and survive on the field how instrumental it was to Matthias' victory there. But then in this game 2, you know, having it KO, getting the Sun in the sky, then did kind of put a dent in the Zapdos' plans as well. You know, those Hurricane misses really were incredibly unfortunate, and Zapdos really wasn't able to apply pressure to game 2. Game 3, however, we are in once again. Weezing out on the field as the lead, stopping the abilities of that Groudon and the Rillaboom, but paired up with the Urshifu for Matthias.
Yeah, so going to be putting a stop to the droughts. Now you've got the super effective Surging Strikes into the Groudon without the worry of at least a priority Grassy Glide. It would still be hit by the Grassy Glides, but just after the Surging Strikes here. And now you've got to be concerned of where the Fake Out is going. You'd assume a Fake Out is going somewhere, whether either to stop the Weezing from going for a Will-O-Wisp into the Groudon or the super effective Surging Strikes coming out from the Urshifu here. So going to make a choice for both players of whether you expect the Fake Out to go into the Weezing, so you protect it to try and preserve that Focus Sash, or you expect the Fake Out to go into the Urshifu as the Groudon tries to get that Sword Stance going, and then you go for a Will-O-Wisp into the Groudon to try and match that. But it looks like the Weezing is trying to preserve its Focus Sash here.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to be the Weezing in this situation. Do you protect or do you Will-O-Wisp? But going for the Protect here, just going to preserve neutralizing gas for this turn. As the Surging Strikes, as you mentioned here, being able to get in without the Sun, dealing some good damage with those 3 critical hits into that opposing Groudon. You can see the difference from game 2 to game 3 now that there is no weather in effect, how much damage this is dealing and putting the Restricted in a really vulnerable position very early on in this game. The U-turn from the Rillaboom is also going to fail. Going into that Protected Rillaboom will be hanging around on the battlefield for this turn. As Precipice Blaze comes out, does manage to connect onto the unprotected Urshifu here, doing a decent chunk of damage, obviously taking a little bit of recall as well. But without that grassy terrain in effect, the Urshifu does not have to worry about a Grassy Glide here.
Yeah, so we'll be able to land that Surging Strikes into that Groudon, guaranteed. Not even a Protect can save it, thanks to the Unseen Visibility. So much stronger start for Matthias in this game 3, getting some huge amount of damage onto that Groudon. Going to be in range of whatever attack Matthias wants to go for. Maybe not quite from the Weezing, but the Urshifu definitely will be able to knock out that Groudon. And now you do threaten the Rillaboom with a Will-O-Wisp or a Sludge Bomb, or any type of poison move that the Weezing does have as well. And the Rillaboom would need to go for a U-turn to avoid that. But then if you do go for U-turn, you allow the Urshifu to survive this turn once again. So you can't really put a stop to that. If you do want to switch out your Groudon like Sangyoon is doing, that is going to give an option to preserve the Sun, because Cherrim is a Pokemon that has decided to join the match.
Oh, little Cherrim on the battlefield for the first time here, but I don't think going to be utilised to its best potential in this situation. However, despite 3 critical hits of Surging Strikes, it is going to be able to take these much better than that Groudon would have, and it looks like Sangyoon wants to be able to reserve that Pokemon for a little bit later on in the game. Grassy Glide is indeed going to come out, but without the priority into that Urshifu, and I think this is really nice here from Sangyoon, just being able to remove that Pokemon as a threat with that Choice Scarf. It was going to be able to outspeed that Groudon when it rejoins the field. Weezing going for the clear Smog here, going to target down into that opposing Rillaboom, do a little bit of damage, but it does give Matthias the opportunity to now bring a free switch in from the back. The one issue, however, is that neutralizing gas is still on the field, the same way it, would have taken away the Unseen Fist ability we were just talking about earlier and kind of leaving Urshifu a little bit vulnerable. The Intrepid Sword is also going to be suppressed here.
Yeah, so this is one of the awkward things about the Weezing, where you do interact with all the abilities on the field, so a slight downside with the Zacian. You want to get that Intrepid Sword going, you do need to switch out your Weezing this turn, but if you do switch out the Weezing, that would allow the switch into the Groudon that would activate its Drought. The Rillaboom will also get its Grassy Terrain going immediately as well, thanks to the Grassy Surge being activated, so it's a slightly awkward one. At least the Cherrim would definitely be in range of the Behemoth Blade at this point. The Rillaboom almost certainly wouldn't be, but maybe if the Weezing were to switch out to allow that Intrepid Sword to activate once again. So still quite a nice position for the Zacian, just facing down to the grass types, not the 2 fire types at the moment.
Yeah, a few protects coming around here, kind of both those supportive Pokemon locking the defensive measures in at this point, as Zacian capitalizes on this and goes for a Swords Dance. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're a Zacian, you're not going to be too threatened by the Rillaboom or the Cherrim. So being able to get that Swords Dance up, and even better, the Rillaboom is able to stay in on the field, going for that U-turn in to protect once again.
Yeah, so very nice turn for Matthias there. You've got the move of choice, whether it's Swords Dance or Substitute, usually on that Zacian there. And Swords Dance is going to be a very effective move choice here. Doesn't matter about that Intrepid Sword, you can still get boosted if you have that Swords Dance. And now going to be threatening a huge amount of damage.
Yeah, in comes the Groudon as Zacian goes for the Behemoth Blade, one of my favorite animations in the game. Always looks so powerful and majestic, targeting down into that Rillaboom, and it will remove it from the fray. It's going to return right back into its Pokeball here after taking that devastating attack. Weezing going to go for the Clear Smog, again just targeting down into that opposing Groudon. Not going to be enough, of course, it's not very effective damage at all, but just applying that little bit more chip to Groudon, reminding it that it is getting ever closer to being KO'd.
Might look like insignificant damage there, but it is going to put it in range of 1 more Life Orb recoil, so it does now only have 1 more attack left in it if the Zacian does choose to ignore it this turn. And Entei is going to be coming in here. Does threaten down the Zacian a lot better than the Cherrim and the Rillaboom did, so we'll have to see how the speed interactions happen with the Zacian and the Entei. Probably going to be able to knock out this Entei in one shot with the fighting move of choice from the Zacian, thanks to that Swords Dance earlier. Maybe you want to guarantee that you'd be able to knock out the Entei if you do switch out your Weezing, but then you do make the risk of activating that Drought and boosting the Sacred Fires of the Groudon there. So Weezing is going to stay in, just protect itself, keep that neutralizing gas on the field.
Yep, just protecting itself up as Flare Blitz comes out from that Entei, going to target down into the opposing Zacian. Does huge damage, picks up the solid KO against it. Huge KO there for Sangyoon. That +2 Zacian is certainly nothing to kind of take and underestimate here. The Precipice Blade's obviously not going to be able to find its mark here at all, but I think Entei really did pick up the critical KO there. If it leaves Matthias with only a Pokemon like the Zapdos coming in, this is where things can get really difficult. We've seen, obviously, the Thunderbolt isn't going to be able to do any damage to that opposing Groudon, and the Hurricanes, if the sun's in the sky, can certainly be a little bit risky.
Still going to be risky even without the sun on the field at the moment. The Weezing's still getting rid of that Drought, but the Drought unnecessary. When you have the move of choice of Flare Blitz over that Sacred Fire, you've got that extra bit of firepower that was enough to pick up the knockout on that Zacian. Sacred Fire most likely not going to be enough on that Zacian, but Flare Blitz slightly strongly getting up that knockout, and we can see the Choice Scarf on the Entei as well. That makes a lot of sense to be able to outspeed those Zacians, and then when you've got your sun up, you can pretty much guarantee the knockouts on the Zacian, but who needs the sun when Flare Blitz is just strong enough at this point? So yeah, really nice position for Sangyoon now at this point. Going to be preserving that Groudon so it doesn't knock itself out, at least to the Life Orb recoil.
Yeah, that's very true. Like you mentioned, Groudon's only really got 1 more attack in it, and it wants to preserve it for a more optimal moment, so just going for the protect. Entei, with that Choice Scarf, going to go straight away for that Flare Blitz into the opposing Zapdos. Does a decent chunk of damage here. Of course, is going to be giving itself some damage in recoil with the Rocky Helmet as well combined, as Zapdos goes for his Hurricane, but into the protect here. So unfortunately, not going to be able to deal any damage in this particular turn.
Yeah, so the Groudon is going to be still around on the field, potentially getting off one more attack with the Precipice Legs or that Heat Crash there. And it looks like it's going to be a 3-hit knockout with the Flare Blitz. Would need the Sun active on the field for that Flare Blitz to now knock out that Zapdos. So still anyone's game here. The Entei is taking a lot of recoil by going for Flare Blitz into a Pokemon holding the Rocky Helmet as well. So going to be chipping itself down at this point. Probably only got 2 more Flare Blitz left in it at this point. So definitely going to be in range of a Thunderbolt if it chooses to go for another Flare Blitz here because of that recoil that would be activated. And we'll have to see here if you're going to be targeting down that Zapdos, as it is going for a Protect here.
Yep, just protects itself up as Flare Blitz does come out and going straight into that Protect. So it's really going to come down to Groudon and whether it's going to be able to remove this Weezing from the field that has not opted to try and get a double Protect here. Will be able to find its mark and take it down to its Focus Sash. My mistake, I thought it had already been broken, but no, not in game 3. So it's able to just hang on here. Groudon will of course be KO'd to that recoil, and now Weezing is in a position where it can go for, unfortunately, the Will-O-Wisp into the Fire type, not going to be happening. I was going to say, I don't know, chipping away with a little bit more Clear Smog, but to no avail. But at least it's able to survive here and, you know, stop any of these abilities coming into the fray.
Yeah, now Cherrim is going to be joining the field, and a very common move choice on that Cherrim is going to be Helping Hand. So making use of the Flower Gift when you're in the sun and then getting the extra attack boost with that Helping Hand definitely is very effective in the sun, but is going to be without the sun here, but may push the Flare Blitz over the edge to be able to KO the Zapdos.
Yeah, Cherrim literally helping out his partner Pokemon here, giving it a little rousing applaud as it goes for that Flare Blitz to be able to pick up the KO against the Zapdos. Again, going to be dealing a significant amount of damage to itself thanks to the Rocky Helmet and some recoil as well, but is able to hang on just with a slither of HP here. Weezing, however, going for the Clear Smog is going to have something to say about that and will be able to pick up the KO against it. And things start to get a little bit interesting here, but in all honesty, the Weezing with 1 HP, I think a gust of wind at this point will be able to remove it from the field, but it's just whether Cherrim has the capability to do so.
It just has to have any move that can do damage at this point. It doesn't matter what it is, so long as it is able to survive the Clear Smog. Whether that even outspeeds the Weezing at this point, we'll have to see the speed interactions of these Pokemon, as they usually just train very bulky to survive all the hits, so you can keep that support on the field. So Clear Smog may not be enough here, but Pollen Puff, not the most effective move against the Poison type, but able to do that 1 damage to pick up the knockout on that Weezing and give the game to Sangyoon and South Korea here.
Oh, I mean, Cherrim there going for the little Pollen Puff. Who needs to worry about type advantage or type weakness in this situation when there's only 1 HP remaining? And that certainly was such a dynamic set. I think I didn't expect going into that. I know we talked about it a little bit, but I didn't expect Weezing to be that pivotal in that match. Just being able to suppress the abilities and, you know, be able to kind of stop the grassy terrain and the sun coming into Sky. But it was just amazing to see Sangyoon be able to pivot around that in the sort of games 2 and 3 and just be able to really pick up those KOs, pick the Pokemon and kind of weaken the strategies that Matthias was kind of going for in that situation, being able to kind of pin down the Zapdos and reduce its accuracy and things like that, I think was really masterfully well played.
Yeah, I think the key moment in that game 3 was that Entei was strong enough to pick up the knockout on that Zacian. Sacred Fire would almost certainly not have been enough on that Zacian. Even if you manage to get the burn, the Zacian is still surviving that turn and getting the attack off. So Flare Blitz, the move of choice there being very crucial, even without the sun, was strong enough. And so we didn't really need the sun at all on the field. Like, the Hurricanes were ending up missing even without the sun. The Cherrim was able to pick up the knockouts and do the support it needs to, even without the Flower Gift. So some nice adjustments from both players. I like the Zacian getting into position with the Swords Dance, just not able to survive. And Sangyoon be able to reposition in that game 2 as well, getting that Groudon threatening everything down. Really nice plays coming out from both players here, but it is going to be Sangyoon winning that set and moving South Korea just slightly closer to that draw against Singapore. So that's going to be it for this game 1. We will be cutting to a short break and we'll be right back